See, those who missed the big picture, they criticize Nolan that he is obsessed with such timelines. Why should someone structure a war movie like a time bending sci fi? Hey, let me start through a comment which I received last week. He was asking about aspiring filmmakers who don't go to film schools. So whether they should analyze movies or not. Do you want to do movies? Or do you want to write scripts? Or do you want to lead any department in the crew? Then watch movies repeatedly and slowly find points which you have missed during the last watch the previous time. This is where you should rewatch and note these points. Start dissecting the movies slowly, okay? Slowly, this will help you realize how masters successfully pulled those scenes. How to make the audience empathize with the characters. How did they cover up their flaws? How did the small detailings enabled the scenes to to convey what was required in right proportions? And so you should notice all those, and this will eventually help you to get better and achieve your dreams. Let's dismantle. I will help you to dissect a scene or sequence. Do you remember the episode in which I dissected the opening sequence of Forrest Gump? Today, I'm going to focus on one of the most engaging scenes of Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. We must have learned about, the Battle of France in our old history textbooks. Actually, it was more like Fall of France. So, when the Nazi forces surrounded them, the soldiers from the British Empire, Belgium, and France, they had to fall back. The miracle of Dunkirk. They were evacuated from the town of Dunkirk, northern France. Like his Memento, Inception, and Interstellar, he made Dunkirk with an exceptionally asynchronous timeline. In Memento, the protagonist was suffering from short-term memory loss. And in Inception, it is about stealing valid information from dreams. And Interstellar is all about exploring interstellar spaces in search of a safe haven for humans. So these three movies are better with such a timeline. Bending the time helped them a lot, actually, right? But what about Dunkirk? Why should someone structure a war movie like a time bending sci fi? See, like I said before, miracle of Dunkirk. It was a miraculous evacuation. So, you know, they're running away from Nazis, but they're running out of time. So the time is a key villain here. Time. This is a bloody reason why they formed three different time periods to narrate three tales, and then he braided those three strands into one single flawless rope. Three time frames means three different pace for these three perspectives. The mall, which unfolds 1 week cinematically, the sea, which unfolds 1 day cinematically, and the air, which unfolds 1 hour cinematically. In each of these, we follow some characters, but at the same time, we are deeply worried about the fate of all the others. Time is ticking for Farrier and Collins, who are flying Spitfires. Not enough fuel. Already their leader is down. We are actually more worried about them at this point, right? Time is also ticking for civilian Dawson and his young son Peter and their helper George. Dawson is actually volunteering and heading towards Dunkirk instead of handing over his ship to the navy. Time is ticking for the soldiers who are standing in long queues, who are waiting and as well as facing attacks one after another. Nolan braided these three time frames so brilliantly. These time frames crisscross the paths and also meets at the point towards resolution. Also, Collins, who fell down into the sea from 1 hour time frame, later joins the 1 day time frame led by Dawson. Similarly, 1 week time frame is connected with the 1 day time frame through the nameless shivering soldier. A soldier portrayed by Cillian Murphy is saved by those who are sailing in the Moonstone. We don't know his name, we don't know anything about him, but he is also a key character. Well, the time frame of the sail of Moonstone is 1 day, but we have seen the same soldier so confident in the 1 week time frame. Which means what? It is making us to anticipate the fate of those who are mounted on the destroyers and the lifeboats. Getting torpedoed is the payoff. By the way, I'll definitely talk about anticipation and payoff in another episode. Let's concentrate and watch one exciting scene more closely. Just like the whole script, we can divide every sequence or even scenes into three acts or into beginning, middle, and end. In the beginning, finally the 1 hour timeline has conjoined with the 1 week timeline. Farrier is flying above the coastline of Dunkirk. All of a sudden, his engine sputters and it is running out of fuel. It dies. Even here, if you check the shots, they cut seamlessly between the objectivity and Farrier's subjectivity. In Bollywood, they would have they would have made it more dramatic. Like Farrier would be taking off his helmet and you know giving that reaction, which points to some sort of imminent sacrifice. But Nolan he decides to cut to the reaction of the soldiers. They watch this Spitfire gliding. Commander Bolton, who was happy that the rescue boats are there, he looks concerned that the Farrier's Spitfire 1 is just gliding without the support of engine. Suddenly we see a change in Bolton's reaction. Here we cut back to the 1 day long time frame. So we are at the edge of the seat. Our mind is way ahead of what's shown. So we are imagining an enemy plane. He makes us reach till there and then switch perspective to the moonstone. Here Collins notices a fighter plane heading in their direction. He's trying to warn Mr. Dawson, but Dawson is way ahead. He has already heard the sound. Earlier we have seen Mr. Dawson's conversation with George. Dawson knows a lot about fighter aircrafts. He can talk about them without even looking at them. Just the sound is enough for him. He says it is an Me-109, that is Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighter aircraft. He asks Peter to take control as per his instructions and make him point it towards south. So now our tension has doubled. In both the timelines, we are expecting the worst. Here begins the middle portion of the sequence. We cut back to the Dunkirk coast. Worsening Bolton's reaction, he hears the strong noise and finally notices a Stuka, a dive bomber, heading towards them. So now Nolan again gave another psychological incentive to encourage us to guess more. It is like, yeah, guys, you were correct. An enemy aircraft is approaching to attack them all. Here we cut back to Moonstone. Mr. Dawson asks his son to accelerate to full speed. So we are like, oh shit, I know what's going to happen. See, this is madness. That's what we will be thinking. And that is when Dawson says Me-109 will have to lower its nose to shoot at them. So he says when the pilot does that, Dawson will signal Peter to pull it hard to the port. And we are like, no, this is way more stupidity than the earlier madness. We cut back to Dunkirk. All of a sudden, we see soldiers bracing themselves for seeing the impact. Bolton is closing his eyes. He's mumbling prayers, I believe. All of a sudden, we start to hear the firing. But what? We cut back to Moonstone, where Mr. Dawson signals Peter to pull hard to port. So the makers tricked us into believing that Stuka has begun firing at soldiers who were standing in the queue, Bolton, and at the rescue boats. And we are expecting similar fate for all those who are aboard the Moonstone boat. Timely move and the Moonstone is safe. This all of a sudden breaks our expectations. And we are suddenly like, wow, so close. Moonstone had a narrow escape. But suddenly we cut back to Dunkirk. Here again, breaking our expectations, we see Stuka taking a hit on its tail and it's falling into the sea. Soldiers are cheering and Bolton reopens his eyes and sees the rays of hope again. The engine died, but it was still armored, right? So Farrier glided it and shot down the Stuka. The Stuka was a dive bomber. It could have killed a lot of soldiers because we have already seen the mess dive bomber aircrafts are, capable of. Master of asynchronous timeline has nailed that suspenseful sequence. He was saving the expository dialogue for the end, the resolution of that sequence. In the end, Collins is quite surprised about Dawson's knowledge. Even we are. I mean, guessing the craft's model by listening to the engine sound is one thing, but he just exhibited exemplary strategy, way above a normal civilian sailor. Mr. Dawson says his son is born among them. And he simply walks away, helping the shivering soldier. And he takes them into the bridge room near the steering. Again, we, as well as Collins, is surprised. Peter is so young. How come he is in Royal Air Force? Peter says it's not him, but his elder brother. He was RAF. He flew hurricanes and died third week into the war. We are super proud of this guy, Dawson, all of a sudden, while he's making sure that the soldiers are comfortable inside the bridge room. One hell of a suspenseful sequence, right? See, if they cooked this linearly, Farrier's or Collins' deeds wouldn't have, lasted much long. So it would never have that impact just like this. See, actually, every soldier, him or her, fighting on land or sea or in the air, they individually make small contributions. And finally, collectively, all these contributions help a side to make a giant leap, right? This is one reason why Christopher, he consciously avoided more backstories and deep informations about characters. The collective effort gives the big picture rather than the perspective of one single or some protagonists. In most of the war movies, we know the backstories of protagonists a bit more. We know what are at stakes and we are emotionally connected with them. So much empathized and involved. In such war movies, war unfolds through the perspectives of these lead protagonists. But what about Dunkirk? The exact opposite. But this doesn't mean everything is objective. In various scenes, we empathize with some character and we live that moment with him or them. For instance, we don't know Tommy much, but he is the only one who survives the ambush, the first scene. He's not getting any chance to aboard the ship soon. So he and another French soldier tries to steal a chance by carrying a wounded soldier on a stretcher. Here, we badly want this guy to get aboard the ship in time. We are worried when he runs across, a wooden piece carrying the weight. Actually, Tommy is equal to every single soldier who waiting in the queue. But we are empathizing more towards Tommy without a backstory. See, even in the climax, we are sad for Farrier. I was heartbroken. The moment I got out of the theater, I searched whether Farrier's character was based on a true pilot. Anyway, even in the mid shot, when Farrier gets arrested, the Nazi soldiers are out of focus. From scene 1, we see enemies killing the Allied forces, but we were not shown their faces. Because even for Farrier, those soldiers are not the enemy, but time is. Time is against him. The collective Nazi force will jail him eventually. If his nation is not trying to extradite him in some timely strategic or diplomatic move, he's done. I've been praising Christopher Nolan too much, but I have to say he did a good job in hiring Stellas as head of the departments for his movie. The cinematography, the editing, the sound, and every department aced and made it a classic. The score, oh man, Hans Zimmer's score. It actually elevated the power of every single shot. Even when Peter reveals about, Dawson, the score just melts us. I don't know how to explain it with words. You know what Tarantino said about Dunkirk? I can keep on talking about this, but this is already too long. I should wind up. I was planning to analyze a scene and I ended up talking, a lot more about the whole movie. But you gotta understand the thirst of a fanboy. Comment or message me your doubts or suggestions. Like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, peace.